Everyone, please take your seats so we can begin. And I hope everybody had a good 2-week constituency break, and got a lot of things done in the riding. So we'll pick up where we left off. Si je ne m'abuse, là, on nous a...
If I'm not mistaken, we were at Amendment BQ13. BQ13. Mr. Longfield, it seems that the sound is not a high enough quality for you to speak, but when it comes to votes, you can still vote out loud. There's no issue there. When it comes to votes, there are no issues. So you don't have to rely on thumbs up or thumbs down. You can still say yay, nay, yes or no, pour ou contre, and that will suffice.
Microphone manually. I wonder whether that makes any difference with the interpreters.
Interprète, est-ce que c'est mieux? Je demande aux interprètes de me donner signe. Mr. Longfield, can you say a few words?
Sure, I've adjusted my microphone manually, and I'm hoping that I come by.
I think I've got a thumbs up. It's far away, but I think I see a thumbs up.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks,
I'm also getting a bit of this too. So we'll but anyway, until I hear differently, you're online. Okay.
I'll clear my voice and speak up.
Yeah. Okay. So alors c'est ça.
So we were at Amendment BQ13. I would like to mention this because it will be followed by NDP 37.1. And I would like to say that the two amendments are not identical, but they are nearly identical. So I need to point that out. Ms. Posey, you have the floor. BQ 13. Wasn't NDP 37 first? No, because we received it this morning, so it's your turn first. Well, that's great. So I'll speak to BQ 13. I'm so sorry, I'm not at the right spot. I'll get there real quick. Okay. So BQ 13 seeks to do this. It wants to reverse the assumption of confidentiality and the assumption of the public. So here we wanted to tighten up this clause because otherwise we feel like we'd be moving backwards. Moving backwards on what? Well, we're going to be relying on what is happening elsewhere in countries similar to ours. For example, the American Act on Controlling Toxic Substances requires that confidential substances be justified specifically. So if you want to have protections for confidentiality, you have to explain why. Same thing in Europe. If someone wants to submit information that needs to be protected, it needs to be explained why. It could pose a risk to their commercial interests. So what we're trying to do with BQ13 is to set conditions on confidentiality. So if it's not public, then the person who is declaring the substance must justify it. So maybe there are products that are on the market that have been analyzed, and then we find that they're carcinogenic, but it could be because the information wasn't available. So that's what BQ 13 seeks to do. So does any member of the committee have anything to say about that? No, so we can move to a vote.
Vote.
Mr. Duguid.
Contre, Monsieur Président.
Mr. Longfield.
Against.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Against.
Ms. Thompson.
Against.
Mr. Weiler.
Against.
Monsieur Deltel.
Contre.
Mr. Kirk.
I'm opposed.
Mr. McLean.
Contre.
Mr. Lake.
Opposed.
Madame Posey.
Pour.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 2, nays contre 9.
Alors, l'amendement est
So the amendment is rejected. We're now moving on to NDP 37.1. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I won't speak too much to this because Madame Posey already explained a number of the reasons why we're putting this forward. It does have slight word changes that I hope will garner support from the rest of the committee.
any debate on this? Apparently not, so we'll go to the vote.
Mr. Duguid.
In support.
Mr. Longfield.
In support.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
In support.
Ms. Thompson.
Sup-
I'm sorry, was that support, Ms. Thompson?
yes, support.
Thank you. Mr. Weiler.
In favor.
Monsieur Deltel.
Contre.
Mr. Kirk.
Opposed.
Mr. McLean.
Opposed.
Mr. Lake. Madame Posey.
En faveur.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 4.
Okay, so the amendment carries. Shall clause 50 as amended carry? On division. Okay. Shall clause 51 carry? On division. Shall clause 52 carry? Okay, clause 53, BQ 14. Je dois souligner.
I have to say first that BQ 14 and NDP 38 are identical. So NDP 38 can't be presented if BQ 14 is... Oh, one moment, please. If it is defeated... Okay, so the simple fact of moving the amendment means that we can't go to NDP 38 after. So either way, presenting BQ 14 means, according to what I've been told, that NDP 38 will not be able to be presented. Ms. Collins.
My understanding was there was an email sent out this morning with a change to BQ 14. Was that correct?
To BQ 14.
Was there an email sent out this morning with a change to BQ 14? Am I looking at the wrong one?
I don't think so.
Oh, my apologies.
There was. Sorry, I'm now advised that there was. So there's a change to BQ 14. So that means they're not identical. Is that correct? Just pause for a moment, please. There was a sub-amendment submitted for BQ 14. Who submitted it?
That would be me, Mr. Chair.
Pardon? Ah, it was you, Mr. Longfield. Okay. So Mr. Longfield submitted a sub-amendment to BQ 14. Has everyone received in writing the sub-amendment?
So is that the one that was sent at 10:42 this morning?
Could be. Sounds like it. So we all have the sub-amendment in writing?
Yes, an email was sent out before the meeting.
And it's being distributed in hard copy, just to be sure.
Just in a point of order, doesn't Madame Posey have to table her amendment first and then we move to a sub-amendment? Or her clause?
Yes, we could do that. Yeah. Okay. I was just trying to get all the ducks in order, but okay, Madame, s'il vous plaît, présent.
Ms. Posey, if you may present your amendment. Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, indeed. I'm trying to find my the sub-amendment. So for us, what we want is to change all of the mays or shalls be replaced by more binding language. We want action here. We don't want it to be too vague with communication. So this is really about communication with the public. The public has a right to know. So here we want to create an obligation. So this is why we are proposing BQ 14. So if I understood correctly, Mr. Longfield has a sub-amendment. Mr. Longfield.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the first two shalls that were proposed in 317.1 subbracket 1 and 3.17.1 subbracket 2 talk about the request for confidentiality, which is something we've handled in another part of this bill where confidentiality is respected in terms of the definition of confidentiality that's handled through Industry Canada. The third shall, I would propose that we maintain that, but because of the definition of confidentiality in other parts of the bill, I would propose that the first two shalls be changed back to may disclose the explicit chemical or biological name, or the minister may disclose the explicit biological name of a living organism in respect to request for confidentiality.
Okay,
but we'd agree with the third shall.
Okay, so
So my sub-amendment would be reverting back to the original language on the first two shalls, going back to may, and then maintaining shall for the third mention.
Two out of three ain't bad. It's Meatloaf said.
Mr. Longfield, just to be sure, the first two shalls you want to change to may, and the last shall you want to leave alone.
That's correct.
Okay. Hey, so sorry, I missed. Somebody said something or raised a point or wanted to intervene.
Mr. Chair, I just have a technical question. I was wondering why the government amendment is a sub-amendment to the block's amendment, because we could have voted on the block amendment and then voted on the sub-amendment. So I was just having a technical question about this. What's a sub-amendment? Well, why are we talking about this sub-amendment when we could have voted on this amendment and then the government could have proposed an amendment without attacking the bloc's amendment? But I'll let the experts decide on this.
Okay, le sous-amendement est
The sub-amendment has already been moved, so we'll have to vote on it. So is there any debate on the sub-amendment, or shall we move straight to a vote? It seems as though we're ready to move to a vote. Mr. Clerk.
sous-amendement de M. Longfield.
Mr. Duguid,
En faveur?
Mr. Longfield,
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
En faveur.
Ms. Thompson,
In favor.
Mr. Weiler,
In favor.
Mr. Deltel,
En accord.
Mr. Kirk,
In favor.
Mr. McLean,
En faveur.
Mr. Lake, Madame Posey,
Contre.
Ms. Collins.
Against.
Yeas pour 9-9, nays contre 2-2.
Alors, le sous-amendement
So the sub-amendment carries. And this brings us to BQ 14 as amended. Does anyone want to speak? Does anyone have anything to say about this? Ms. Collins?
I want to thank Madame Posey for putting this forward. It is the same as NDP 38, and I support. It was the same as NDP 38, which I think is a stronger version of this amendment, but I will be supporting it because I think even the change of one of the mays to shall is a move in the right direction.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, I need some clarification here. We agreed because it gives the minister some latitude to decide whether or not he will disclose, but we also agree with the fact that the last point needs to be compulsory. But this really goes against the Bloc's position. Ms. Posey was saying that we needed to remove the choice and that the minister had to disclose, and I would like to know what the Bloc has to say about this sub-amendment that has just been carried. It really robs the spirit of the amendment, and I'd like to hear what Ms. Posey has to say about it. Well, it takes the spirit away at the rate of 2/3, so I still have one shall. So I will vote in favor of the amended BQ 14. I did vote against the amendment because I knew I was going to lose anyways, but I will vote in favor of BQ 14. It's still a third of a win, so it's like one strike in baseball, right? Or the opposite. Okay, so I guess we'll tackle this one shall at a time. So shall we move to the vote? Mr. Clerk, on BQ 14 as amended.
Mr. Duguid,
Pour?
Mr. Longfield,
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
In favor.
Ms. Thompson,
In favor.
Mr. Weiler,
In favor.
Mr. Deltel,
Contre.
Mr. Kirk,
Opposed.
Mr. McLean,
Contre.
Mr. Lake,
Opposed.
Madame Posey,
En faveur.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 7-7, nays contre 4-4.
Alors, l'amendement est
So the amendment carries. We are now moving on to NDP 38. Ms. Collins, you have the floor.
Okay, so I'm of the opinion, or I've been told that the committee would, in a sense, be contradicting itself if we went ahead with, and we can't allow that. So we'll have to skip over NDP 38, but I don't see any objection on the part of Ms. Collins. So we'll go to Parti Vert 23.
We're going on to Green Party 23, Ms. May. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is one of my efforts to correct the bill to eliminate the one list of toxic substances.
Which has always been a list of toxic substances in one schedule. This law, S5, weakens the whole scheme of the legislation by creating two lists. My amendment here would not make sense at this point. Were I a member of the committee, I would ask to withdraw it. But I'm here due, as you'll all recall, to the motion you passed, which I hope you understand I really hate and wish that I wasn't subjected to this instead of being allowed to have my rights and present amendments at report stage. That said, I expect this amendment to be defeated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. May. Is there debate on this, or do we just go to a vote? Madame Posey?
Ms. Posey? I have a question, Mr. Chair. I haven't truly understood what the leader of the Green Party said. Does it mean that since the committee voted against all of the other Green Party amendments, this one no longer makes sense? I think it's because we voted against the idea, if I understood correctly, of maintaining the list of toxic substances. So to remain coherent, if we agree with how we're presenting the lists that are in S5, so we can't go back on the toxic substances matter. Is that correct, Ms. May? Ms. Collins?
Yeah, I was just going to say this amendment doesn't no longer make sense since the rest of the amendments were voted down. I'll be voting in favor of it because I voted in favor of the other amendments. I support the spirit of this, but I also expect it to be defeated.
Okay. We need to be more positive in this committee, I think. Okay. We'll go to the vote, I guess.
Mr. Dogood.
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield.
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Opposed.
Ms. Thompson.
Opposed.
Mr. Weiler.
Opposed.
Mr. Deltel.
Contre.
Mr. Kirk.
I'm opposed.
Mr. McLean.
Opposed.
Mr. Lake. Madame Posey.
En faveur par principe.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 2-2, nays contre 9-9.
So the amendment is defeated, and that brings us to G14.4. Who's presenting that?
Are we on NDP 39, Mr. Chair?
No, we're on. Well, what about G14.4?
Mr. Chair, I also have G14.4 and by Mr. Dogood.
Yeah, maybe it was sent. It wasn't in the original package. It was. Moi, j'ai un des.
Oh, 38.
Yeah, so am I. Just a second. Yeah, we have G14.1. Okay, we have G14. We have G14.2. Page 120.1 in your package. So who's presenting that? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'm getting some advice that we've already passed this. Is that correct? February 16th. Yikes.
Just take a little break here and figure this out.
Yeah, that'd be good. Chair, there seems to be some uncertainty here, so why don't we pass it again? I'll move 14.4. I think everyone has the language, Mr. Chair.
Do you have anything you want to add to?
No, I think it's clear
self-evident?
unless...
Okay. Anyone else? Would anyone else like to speak to this? No? Yes, Mr. Coury?
Sorry, thanks, Chair. I'm wondering if is it's adding an additional reporting or clarifying, I think, reporting requirement. So I'm wondering if the officials could weigh in on the proposed addition of 317.3, and just to expand as to if there are additional reporting requirements, if it complements current reporting requirements, just to determine kind of where this is at. Thank you.
To take that question?
Yes, thank you for clarifying what the amendment is. So it's an addition of 317.3 and a requirement to include in the annual report a report about the names of substances or biological or living organisms that have been unmasked. So I guess that is a new, the requirement to, or the discretionary power, and now the partly requirement to unmask names is new. That was added by S5. So this would be just an explicit new reporting requirement.
Mr. Coury, then Mr. McLean.
Thank you. So you're saying that this functionally already happens. This just makes it explicit in the requirement. Am I interpreting that correctly?
I don't think right now we report in the annual report when substances are unmasked. So this just makes it explicit. I'm not sure that anybody's ever sort of turned their mind to it as being something we should include in the annual report. So it just makes it explicit.
Thank you.
So we've just passed an amended motion here on 317.1 and 2, where we use may instead of shall in 1 and 2. And here we're saying something the minister shall include by section 342. So 1, 2 in 317.1 or 317.2, the biological name. So the may disappears in the annual report is what we're saying here, the way I read this. Am I wrong?
Right. That is okay. So that's right, because you're saying if the minister did unmask the names, then just include a summary of what's been unmasked in the annual report so people can see, so there's some transparency about which names have been unmasked during
But
the year.
it doesn't say unmasked, though, in this section. It says shall include in the annual
Disclosed. Well,
report.
it says which ones have been disclosed under that discretionary power.
Okay, thank you.
Any more comments or questions, or can we go to a vote on this? Yeah, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Duguid,
In favor.
Mr. Longfield,
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
In favor.
Ms. Thompson,
In favor.
Mr. Weiler,
In favor.
Monsieur Deltel, Mr. Kirk,
In favor.
Mr. McLean,
Pour.
Mr. Lake,
In favor.
Madame Posey,
Pour.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 11-11.
Okay, shall clause 53 as amended carry? On division. Clause 54, NDP 39, Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you'll notice that this amendment talks about environmental and biological diversity and human health. And in particular, we are talking about kind of pollution hotspots and regional differences. I want to thank the Manitoba Eco Network for their work on this topic. It's, I think, an important move forward, and I hope the committee will support it.
Yes, Mr. Duguid.
Mr. Chair, if I could defer to officials. I know because I've spoken to the Manitoba Eco Network a number of times that the provisions in the new SEPA actually strengthen a geographical approach to areas like hotspots and not the opposite. And I wonder if officials could elaborate on that.
Yes, sure. So the section in SEPA, section 333.1, the original SEPA said that you could make regulations that were geographically targeted for regulations authorized under certain sections of the Act. So the policy objective was to make sure you could make geographically targeted regulations for regulations made under any part of the Act. So it's true, it could have been explicitly provided in SEPA. However, in the Interpretation Act in Section 8, it says that you can that federal statutes and regulations apply to the whole of Canada by default, but may be expressly tailored to apply in specific regions. So we're basically relying on the Interpretation Act, which says that you can make geographically targeted regs, so that we can do regs under any parts of SEPA to be geographically targeted.
Oui, je suis sûre que vous serez pas surpris.
You won't be surprised by my question, Mr. Chair, but I'm wondering if there's any possible conflicts with provincial jurisdictions and Quebec's jurisdiction.
Je dirais.
I would say that all actions done by the federal government must fall under federal jurisdiction. And that's why there are regulations that are targeted to regions. We cannot include anything that goes beyond federal jurisdiction. Listen, the Bloc likes to be extra protected to make sure that jurisdiction is respected. So when it says may be made applicable in only a part or parts of Canada's in order to protect the the constitutional jurisdictions.
C'est un sous-amendement.
That would be a sub-amendment. That's a proposal for a sub-amendment. Could you send that to us in writing?
Pardon? OK. OK, c'est envoyé. Parfait.
That's been sent. Perfect. So everyone received the amendment from Ms. Posey. The sub-amendment, that is.
So we'll have to read it out so that we can get the English version as well, but everybody should have the French version. Yeah, just a sec. We'll go to Mr. Deltel then. Je vous oublierai pas, Monsieur Deltel.
I won't forget you, Mr. Deltel.
Non, là, est-ce que ça a été envoyé?
Was this sent to everyone?
No. Oh, it was in both languages. Okay. So, okay. Vous avez...
The microphone is off. I think the explanation is simple. We talked about constitutional jurisdiction, but here I wanted to add the notion of respecting provincial and territorial jurisdiction. Mr. Deltel, Mr. Chair, I'll make my esteemed colleague very happy. I completely agree with her amendment. But here's the issue. We feel obligated to include it in the bill, and that's a problem. Why? Well, because, of course, our laws should be respecting jurisdictions. But if we're now finding ourselves in a parliamentary committee where we feel the need to write in an act that the act needs to respect federal and provincial and territorial jurisdiction, we have a problem as a country. Some people might say that over the last few years, we've started feeling the federal government overreaching and impeding on territorial and provincial jurisdictions, and that's why we're writing it in black and white.
Monsieur Duguid.
Mr. Duguid.
So, Mr. Chair, I was going to speak on the amendment.
Okay. So,
are we going to deal with the sub-amendment
yes,
first?
we will. Yes.
Okay.
Oui, Madame Collins.
Ms. Collins on the sub-amendment.
Yeah, I guess my understanding from the officials is that this isn't necessary, that we aren't, that this seems like a kind of duplication of process. And at the same time, I do think when we're talking about pollution hotspots, I think there are gaps both federally and provincially, and I would hope that strengthening these laws would help fill those gaps in all jurisdictions.
Okay, shall we vote on the sub-amendment?
Mr. Duguid,
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield,
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
Opposed.
Ms. Thompson,
Oppose.
Mr. Weiler,
Opposed.
Mr. Deltel,
Je suis pour.
Mr. Kirk,
Support.
Mr. McLean,
En faveur.
Mr. Lake,
In favor.
Madame Posey,
En faveur.
Ms. Collins.
Opposed.
Yeas pour 5-5, nays contre 6-6.
Okay, so the amendment, the sub-amendment is defeated. We go now to the amendment. Who wanted to speak on the amendment? Somebody? Yeah, Mr. Duguid, yeah.
Mr. Chair, we had a number of delegations before us, Indigenous communities. We had the Manitoba Eco Network and other organizations representing inner city communities that are facing pollution issues. And I want officials to be absolutely clear. The revisions to SEPA that we see in S5 will improve that situation and will make it more, it will make it more probable that these kinds of situations can be dealt with. I just want you to make it absolutely clear, because there is this concern that we've heard repeatedly before a committee, and I'd just like those assurances from officials.
Well, I would say certainly the amendment that was not the amendment, but the S5 pursues a policy intention to allow geographically targeted regs, which of course, is partly to allow to address things like hotspots, and also, the committee has adopted, and S5 includes a right to a healthy environment, and which is, meant to provide a equitable enjoyment of a healthy environment, and also avoid disproportionate burdens on vulnerable people or already disadvantaged people. So this is an enabling act and will enable actions to get at those issues.
Any more debate on this amendment and NDP 39? Ms. Collins?
Yeah, in S5 is right now removing an explicit authority around how we are able to manage pollution hotspots. And what I'm hearing is that authority could exist in the implementation framework and be used in that way. I think it's important that we keep this explicit authority in law. Is that no? Okay.
So I just want to clarify.
Please.
The removing 333.1 was to 333.1 was narrow. It only allowed us to geographically target regs for specific regs under the Act. We remove it, and then we can rely on Section 8 of the Interpretation Act, which says we can target regs. And then I, in my answer, referred to the implementation framework just to answer the question about are we doing something good in S5 to enable action on hotspots. So those were unrelated, like that implementation framework is unrelated to the provision you're dealing with right now.
And this amendment where we're putting back in an ability for, or an explicit ability for us to target it, what would be the impact of putting that back in?
Well, it's not necessary because you have the Interpretation Act. Putting it back in, I would just want to make sure that we've covered every authority, regulation-making authority under the Act. Like, it could be more narrow, actually, then, because I think this amendment includes lists of regulations. So I haven't actually checked to make sure that we've covered everything we want to cover.
I guess it has Section 93, Section 135, Section 140, 167, 177, 200, Section 94 or 200. And so, what I'm hearing is that in the previous iteration, you took it out because it was too narrow, and it's now in the Interpretation Act. What I think Manitoba Eco Network and the Canadian Environmental Law Association have been arguing is that we need an explicit requirement in this act to ensure that we're dealing with pollution hotspots. There are, as my colleagues mentioned, people who are living in close proximity to industrial pollution in inner cities. Often these communities are racialized, Indigenous communities. I think it's important that we ensure that our law is protecting communities who are disproportionately impacted by pollution. And so, yeah, I'm going to continue to support my own motion, clearly, and I do hope that the committee members will consider supporting it as well. I think especially in areas like Winnipeg, and I encourage people to read the report that Manitoba Eco Network published around healthy communities and healthy environment. It is so essential that we deal with and address this because we haven't been. We've been failing on this front.
Any more comments before we go to a vote? Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Ms. Collins is saying, the whole concept of environmental racism, which we've been talking about. But it seems to me from what Ms. Farquharson is saying is that it is protected by removing this and removing the restrictions. So I agree 100%, but I don't feel this is necessary to actually meet those objectives.
Okay, shall we go to the vote?
Mr. Duguid.
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield.
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Opposed.
Ms. Thompson.
Opposed.
Mr. Weiler.
Opposed.
Mr. Deltel.
Opposed.
Mr. Kirk.
Opposed.
Mr. McLean.
Opposed.
Mr. Lake. Madame Posey.
En faveur.
Ms. Collins.
In support.
Yeas pour 3, nays contre 8, 8.
OK, donc l'amendement est défait.
So the amendment is defeated. We are now voting on Clause 54. Shall Clause 54 carry? On division, maybe?
Vous voulez demander le...
You want to seek unanimous consent? Mr. Chair, I would like to confirm that I'm a man and that I can't multitask, and unfortunately, the vote I made was not the one I intended to make. That's the kind of thing that happens. I just confirmed. I'm very embarrassed about it, and I'm seeking unanimous consent to reverse my vote. It seems to be granted.
OK, alors...
So, shall 54 carry on division? Yes, okay, carried.
Okay. Okay. So we go now to 55 and G15.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move this motion, which would effectively reverse the Senate's additions to Section 332. While I appreciate the work the Senate did to try and increase public participation and transparency, their amendments actually risk duplicating and confusing other requirements that already exist under the Act. They may also lead to implementation of challenges for the bill. So, for example, subsection 332, subsection 1 of the Act also requires the minister publish draft orders and regulations for a 60-day public comment period. And also subsection 13.1 of the Act also requires that the environmental registry contain notices other than documents published or made publicly available by the minister. Those would include notices of any approval granted under the Act. Notably, the environmental registry itself already includes a section dedicated to public consultations, both active and completed. There are also links to a search engine now that contains all Government of Canada's open, closed, and planned consultations. So there's also a new online commenting feature available for all stakeholders wishing to send comments on proposed regulations published in the Canada Gazette. So I would make the amendment of taking out the subsection 332, the notice made public portion of what's in front of us.
Okay, are there any... Oui, Madame Posey.
Ms. Posey? Go ahead. Sorry. I'd like to understand something. Mr. Longfield, when you started to present your amendment, you said that you agreed overall with the idea that the Senate had to make things more transparent. However, since we've started the consideration of this bill, every time it was a question of transparency, the committee voted against it in the majority. So here we're saying one thing, and we're so proud of one thing, but we're actually voting differently. So here we were seeking to require the publication of all notices and decisions made related to the Act. And here the government is presenting an amendment that seeks to delete all of these consultations that were proposed by the Senate. And this is what's done. This is something that they've done since the beginning. We have to stop saying that we're listening to the population and acting differently. So we need to put our money where our mouths are. Any other comments?
Feel then, Ms. Collins. Mr. Longfield?
Yes, Mr. Chair. And with respect, what I'm proposing here is to take out duplications and to streamline and make our processes more transparent. So by removing duplications, which might otherwise confuse the process, but maybe the officials could clarify the technical part of what I'm proposing.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So the Senate amended this provision to provide the publication of all notices under the Act, including notices of consultation, and any decisions made under the Act in multiple modes and media. So it says publish them in the Gazette, in the Registry, in newspapers, and already there are, so it's duplicative in that we're already required, for instance, to publish proposed orders and regulations in the Canada Gazette for 60 days. And so you wouldn't, you wouldn't want to publish them in every single mode, I don't think. And also it's very, very, it's a duplication in that sense. And we've got the registry already. And we've also got a new online system where all regulations are being published. And as it says, as Mr. Longfield says, where the public can comment on them.
Ms. Collins?
Just another question for the officials. So if I'm understanding correctly, so the Senate added a requirement to publish in a number of different areas, including the Gazette, the Registry, and in all kind of media outlets. Is that correct? Was there anything else that you see being taken out by taking out line 32?
That I see being taken out.
As in, is there anything else that is changing with this, like other than the provision to publish in those three areas? Do you see any other impact to this replacement?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's duplicative in that it's naming things that are already named under other parts of the Act to be published, and it says, in addition to any other requirement of this Act, a notice under this Act, a notice of any consultation to be held in relation to a matter, and any decision made under this Act, which is not otherwise required. So I guess I would say any decision made under this Act for which a notice is not other required, I would say that too is that's very vague to me. I don't know what that
means. And so probably that vague piece is not duplicated in another part of the Act. The concern there is just you would be unsure how to interpret it. Is that? And so the requirement to publish whenever there are consultations, you're saying that part is definitely covered in other sections of the Act? Is that?
Consultations on regulations, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, in fact, those have really broadened in recent years because they happen for pre-consultations as well.
And if
before you start developing the regulation.
Yeah, if this amendment fails, and you then were having to live with the Senate amendments, how would that be interpreted? What would be the results exactly when it comes to the consultations and any decision made under this Act? I mean,
I think. Well, I think the result would be where we already have the required publication on this new online reporting system called ORCS. We already have it in some cases it's in the Canada Gazette or the Registry. I think it would be the newspaper or other periodical that has a large circulation. And on the website, like, I don't know what's the distinction between on the website and in the registry? Like, it will lead to a lot of thinking about every single situation. And
Thanks.
I don't think that it's a helpful addition to the transparency.
Thanks for that.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Oui, Madame Posey.
Oui, j'aurais.
Yes, Ms. Posey. Oh, I had Mr. Dogood first. He brought his hand down, but it was his turn. Oh, no. So now you, Ms. Posey. So on page 42 in S5, when it says asking the revision commission, the constitution of a revision commission, would the transparency issue apply here? Do other clauses mention this revision commission? What I understand is that these clauses on transparency speak to this commission. So it speaks to other parts of the Act, sure, but it doesn't speak to the revision commission. But maybe I'm misunderstanding? Under S5 at page 42, there's the notice of opposition to any person may file with the minister comments or a notice of objection requesting that the Board of Review be established under Section 333. So I'm saying, would this not apply to the Board of Review?
Je fais le lien.
I'm just drawing a connection here between the Senate's desire to say that we'll publish things on the website, on the registry, on the Gazette, etc. These are all matters of transparency that the Senate was trying to put in. And I'm wondering if there's a connection here with the Board of Review, because you said that there were other parts of the Act where we spoke to transparency. Well, it's in the same part, but these are different topics. Any other questions or comments before we move to the vote on G15? No? Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Dogood.
In favor.
Mr. Longfield.
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
In favor.
Ms. Thompson.
In favor.
Mr. Weiler.
Pour.
Monsieur Deltel.
Je suis pour.
Mr. Couric.
In favor.
Mr. McLean.
In favor.
Mr. Lake.
Also in favor.
Madame Posey.
Contre.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 10-10, nays contre 1-1.
Okay, so the amendment carries. Shall clause 55 as amended carry? On division. Shall clause 56 carry? On division. Clause 57, we have a new G16. It means improved. It means improved. But
We had a G16 and then we got a new version from them. So pour éviter la confusion.
improved, yes, indeed. Okay, so who's going to speak to it? Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Government supports this motion because it respects the Senate amendment and ensures that a report on the Indigenous peoples is included in the CEPA annual report. In addition, the motion clarifies the scope of the findings and recommendations that must be included in the report.
Any other questions or comments? Shall we go to, oui, Madame Posey.
Ça va juste être
I have a comment, Mr. Chair. When I saw G16 in the old version of it, I figured they must have made a mistake because they were setting aside everything that spoke to the relationship with Indigenous people. So I will vote in favor of the new G16.
I have a very similar comment, just in that I'm glad now to see explicit reference to Section 35 of the Constitution Act and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. I think it's really important that we ensure the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act is actually changing all of our legislation as we move forward. This is incredibly important work, and I'm glad to see this new G16 in this version.
Mr. McLean.
Yeah, I'll seek some expert opinion from our officials here on this, because Section 35 is mentioned in what's being deleted here, and it's not. Oh, it is mentioned as well in the. So, can we get clarity from our officials about what's the difference between the substantive difference, if you will, between the original writing of the bill and the amendment that we're talking about here, please?
Sure. The main difference is, well, the main difference is that the Senate amendment required a report every 5 years, and so now this reporting requirement is going to be part of the annual report. And then I think the Senate amendment talked about reporting on details on measures implemented to ensure the Act is administered in a way that complies with Section 35, the principle of the honour of the Crown, and Canada's treaty relationships and its fiduciary obligations to Aboriginal peoples. So that wording has been says that measures take, instead of using those concepts, it says the reporting must include measures taken to advance reconciliation as reflected in Section 35 and in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Then
So-
I would say otherwise, the Senate amendment also wanted to include a report on any evaluations or findings or recommendations in respect to the administration of the Act as it relates to Aboriginal peoples of Canada, and Section C, subsection C of the proposed amendment, sort of says that in a different way, like it refers to findings or recommendations of any report made under an act of Parliament in respect of the administration of the Act. So it's just defining it in a way that makes it more explicit.
I'm not sure there's an expert at the table on this, but are you worried there might be some non-overlap between Section 35 rights and the rights as defined by the United Nations and the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? And if that happens, what will be the outcome of this?
So the references in this amendment are to Section 35 of the Constitution and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People Act. So that's a federal act. So the Act should comply with the Constitution. I mean, strictly speaking, one doesn't need to mention the Constitution in a statute. We're all bound by it. So they should all align. And I think the point is to reference those in relation to reconciliation, and the point is to have a report that requires people to think through their decisions in respect of that objective and to report on it, to sort of consolidate all the work that's going on and report on it.
And so this will change a 5-year reporting requirement that the Senate put in here to an annual reporting requirement.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Okay. Shall we go to a vote?
Mr. Duguid,
In favor, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Longfield,
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
In favor?
Ms. Thompson,
In favor.
Mr. Weiler,
In favor.
Monsieur Deltel,
En accord.
Mr. Kirk,
Support.
Mr. McLean,
En faveur.
Mr. Lake,
In favor.
Madame Posey,
En faveur.
Ms. Collins,
In favor.
Yeas pour 11.
Okay, so G16 carries, shall clause 57 as amended carry? Under shall clause 59 carry? Shall clause 60 carry? Shall clause 61 carry? Shall clause 62 carry? And that brings us to clause 63 and PV 24. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This begins a different thread of my amendments. It stands on its own. It's worth passing, please. And it deals with where we are. If you go to page 46 of S5, under Regulations, Section 63, currently S5 proposes to repeal the virtual elimination list and to repeal regulations adding perfluorooctane sulfonate in its salts. If you're wondering what that is, and I hope you thought about it, it's basically Scotchgard. And to repeal the regulations that added the virtual elimination list. We wouldn't need to do this if we kept the virtual elimination list and allowed, as my amendment, now PV 24, would be the Minister of Health and Minister of Environment and Minister of Health may, by regulation, add a substance to the virtual elimination list. Then they can go forward and include other substances that we really need to see virtually eliminated, including, obviously, the named substances, perfluorooctane sulfonate and its salts, but there will be others. So I urge the committee to rethink repealing the virtual elimination list. It's an important part of the scheme of legislation to deal with toxic substances. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments? Questions? Shall we go to a vote?
Mr. Duguid,
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield,
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
Opposed?
Ms. Thompson,
Opposed.
Mr. Weiler,
Contre.
Monsieur Deltel,
Je suis contre.
Mr. Kirk,
Opposed.
Mr. McLean,
Contre.
Mr. Lake,
Opposed.
Madame Posey,
En faveur.
Ms. Collins,
In favor.
Yeas pour 2, nays contre 9.
Okay, donc l'amendement.
So the amendment is defeated. Shall 63 carry? On division, perfect. Shall clause 64 carry? Shall 65 carry? Clause 66. Shall clause 67 carry? On division?
Mr. Chair, it's
Yes.
Lloyd.
Yes, Mr. Longfield.
On 67, I had an amendment to put forward.
Okay, so that we just adopted 66 on division. Is 67 1.1, I guess?
Yeah, 67.1. We were on a roll, so I just wanted to put the brakes on.
Go ahead, Mr. Long. You want to propose your amendment?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to vote against including 67.1. That it's something that's an anomalous provision that was added by the Senate. It doesn't modify CEPA. and it doesn't relate to either the minister is responsible for SEPA. It's a standalone requirement that the Minister of Industry prepare a report within 1 year, and it should be removed from Bill S5. Additionally, this provision also looks to contradict the Best Placed Act and the
Sorry,
Best Placed
Mr.
Minister
Longfield,
approach.
sorry to interrupt you, but we don't have the amendment. Pardon?
The amendment is to remove 67.11.
Oh, I see. So that's your motion.
Yeah.
Okay. So then it's a motion from the floor.
Okay, motion, sorry. Yeah.
Un instant. Okay, so basically what you're saying, it's not an amendment, you're just stating your position, which is that you're going to vote against 67. So we're on 67 now, and you'd like to speak to it. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to have a motion to delete clause 67.1. And to continue with kind of the rationale that it's contradicting the Best Placed Act and the Best Placed Minister approach. The content required to be included in this report is vague. It's not necessarily within the scope of SEPA. The provision refers broadly to Canadian standards and is ensuring that imported products are safe for Canadian consumers and that the Canadian producers are not at a disadvantage. It's unclear which standards or products that this is addressing. Work is also being undertaken by both Environment and Climate Change Canada as well as Health Canada to explore voluntary and mandatory mechanisms for further labeling of consumer products and to greater clarify the supply chains. This work is going to be capable of delivering on some of the expectations that would otherwise have been placed on the Minister of Industry in delivering his report. So the Government of Canada will be developing and publishing a strategy in 2023 to enhance supply chain transparency and labeling for substances of products. The strategy is going to include regulatory measures and voluntary collaborative initiatives. It's going to be consistent with Best Placed Act approach, as well as taking into account other federal authorities respecting labeling, such as those under the Canada Consumer Product Safety Act. So for those reasons, I don't think this belongs in the SEPA legislation, and I'd like to see us delete this clause.
Okay, so it's not a motion. You're just stating that you're encouraging members of the committee to vote against it. Anyone else?
Sorry, Chair. Just a point of clarification, if I could. We passed Clause 66 on division. We're now on 67. However, Mr. Longfield, I believe, is referencing 67.1. Am I correct in that understanding? So we're not quite there yet procedurally, if I'm understanding?
I think it is on here.
67 carry.
In the agenda, it's 67.
Did we?
So.
Intervention, Mr. Chair.
Okay, but
You missed it.
so we adopted 67.
So you was talking about 67.1.
It's 67.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's the minor.
Okay. So we're on 67.1. Apologize for the confusion, but okay. So Mr. Longfield is encouraging everyone to vote against 67.1. Who would like? Ms. Collins.
Could we just hear from the officials what the impact of keeping in the requirement for reporting would be?
Yes, I would say it's not, this isn't something that the Minister of Industry would normally take on, so it wouldn't be the right minister to do this report. As well, all imported items, they're subject to Canadian laws, so it's sort of a suggestion that they are not, and there are already mechanisms to assure that. There are always a range of tools that can be used to make sure that products do meet standards. Now, I understand people feel like maybe they're not always used, but the tools exist.
And is there
Sorry, we have the officials are speaking, but we're going to have a recorded vote. Yeah, I believe. Yeah.
So I guess I mean, the impact is that this is not the right minister in any case to be doing this. So.
And is this reporting happening in any way, shape, or form? Like, who would be the right minister to report on this? And like, if we were to change the minister, is it still duplicating? What would be the impact to some kind of amendment that would change the minister responsible and make this more of a best place to act provision?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I guess it would be the ministers of Environment and Health. But I guess I would say that the tools already exist to the extent that the enforcement tools are there, and there is work going on to the extent that labeling is part of, and supply chain transparency is part of the work that needs to be done. The departments have committed to undertake quite a bit of work in that area, including developing a strategy on labeling that considers best place to act sometime in this year. So.
And explicitly, this provision that Mr. Longfield is advocating to take out is requiring a report from the minister. So what you're saying is, A, the minister that's named in this provision is not the correct one. But when it comes to actually reporting on what's happening, how the tools are being used, is that happening currently?
Not probably not in a consolidated way.
And do you see any value in having that reporting mechanism put in place?
Well, I don't really feel like I'm the one to answer that. Like that's.
Do you know who? Sorry, who
well,
would be the? And just for my, I apologize for my ignorance in this. If we're talking about a reporting mechanism that would be implemented by the Minister of Environment and Minister of Health, who would be the best person to advise on whether it's necessary to have that kind of reporting mechanism?
I'm not sure that that's more of a policy question, or is that what you're saying, Ms. Farquharson? It's
yeah,
It's like it's kind of a policy question, and officials, I don't think, generally answer policy questions.
Yes, maybe to rephrase, what would be the impact of having that reporting requirement? What would be the impact of not having the reporting requirement?
I guess the work would really focus on the strategies that are underway on getting at supply chain transparency and labeling instead of on this reporting. And the other thing I would just point out about this is it does require a report regarding measures to test imported products. And I think like that also just happens already and under enforcement. I mean, they're developing their priorities for the year and they figure out what to focus on. So I'm not sure, like, I don't think a specific elevation of this particular issue is the right way to go.
Mr. Couric, did you have something? No way. No. Okay, then I've got Mr. Longfield.
I brought down my hand. I mean, this is the minister. Okay. Minister of ISED is working on this. So,
go to a vote.
Mr. Duguid.
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield.
Against.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson.
Against.
Mr. Weiler.
Against.
Monsieur Deltel.
Contre.
Mr. Kirk.
I'm opposed.
Okay.
Mr. McLean.
Opposed.
Mr. Lake.
Opposed.
Madame Posey.
Désolée, je comprends qu'on vote pour le fait d'enlever 67.1.
Ben non, on vote sur, en fait, est-ce qu'on veut adopter l'article 67.1 ou non?
Oui.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I just wasn't getting any French translation. I did understand what you said, but just to make sure that as we move forward that we're having French translation.
Yeah. Okay. We're good now, I think. I got a thumbs up back there. Okay.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 2-2, nays contre 9-9.
So the 67.1 disappears now. Yeah. Okay. Shall 68, clause 68 carry? Shall 69 carry? Yes, shall 69 carry? Okay, now we get back to clause 2. Yeah, it's at the end. So now we're into clause 2, which so we're going back. We're going back to the beginning when we stood all those amendments and so on. So we have G1.
Why aren't we dealing with G17 now?
We're not.
Okay, sorry.
It's at the end. It's at the end. Yeah. So who would like to speak table G1?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to withdraw G1 in favor of a motion I believe Madame Posey has, as hers is preferred.
Okay, I don't have BQ01 on my list here.
Yes, anyway, I'm withdrawing G1,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Well, it hasn't been tabled.
And it was
so,
the whole
yeah.
discussion, I believe, around.
But it hasn't been tabled. So what you're saying is you're not going to table it.
I'm not going to table it. That's correct.
Okay, so then that brings us to NDP2. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment is about the rights of nature. This is a conversation that's been happening amongst Canadians, but also internationally. We are giving people in Canada the right to a healthy environment, but also many advocates are arguing that forests, rivers, seas can have rights as legal entities in and of themselves. And I want to give a shout out to my colleague, Mr. Boulouris, who is currently working to protect the St. Lawrence River, giving that body of water legal rights. There are advocates in my home community of Victoria, in the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, who are also looking to have important areas and pieces of nature recognized as living entities that have legal rights. And so this motion speaks to that, recognizing that nature has the right to be protected, preserved, and restored. Thank you.
Point rappel.
A point of order, please. It's called a point of order, rappel au règlement in French. I lost track here. When Mr. Duguid said that he was no longer going to present G1, whatever happened to BQ01? Everyone received it at 10:48 this morning. So do we have to go back and speak to BQ01 before we do NDP2? So we'll do it after NDP2, BQ 0.1.
That Collins?
Yeah, I think I spoke to it, hoping that the committee members will support recognizing that nature has the right to be protected, preserved, and restored.
Mr. Duguid?
Mr. Chair, I wonder if we could get officials to comment. As colleagues will know, we just held the Biodiversity Convention in Montreal, committed to protecting 30% of our land and waters by 2030. So I think all of us around this table are committed to protecting nature, but my understanding is there's some difficulties with the way SEPA is written, and in terms of the intent that Ms. Collins has, and I wonder if the officials would comment.
Sure, and I think this was articulated in the discussion, the debate the committee had on NDP4 last December, because this idea was also in the duties section of the bill, which we've gone through already. And I think like giving a right to nature or elements of nature would really change the scope of the right in the bill. And what's in the bill right now proposes recognition of a right of every individual to a healthy environment. So if you were to, I mean, it's just it's a completely different kind of concept. And it would be a real shift in paradigm and require some careful consideration. And there's nothing in the bill to sort of operationalize it. Typically, you have something representing nature in order to give it standing in discussions, and that the rest of that sort of mechanism isn't in the bill.
Yes, Ms. Collins.
I do hope, I understand that most of the committee members are likely going to vote against this motion. I do hope that as we move forward, even if this amendment is defeated, that the conversation around the rights of nature, the advocates who have been putting forward specific forests, rivers, seas as legal entities that require protection, I think they are moving the needle on this conversation, and I hope that in the future we can see this principle incorporated into our legislation.
Well, I think it's going to be a topic in our water study, in fact. And it might require an additional meeting to the 8 that we've agreed to, because it's a very important issue. We'll go, okay, so are there any other comments? It's a very interesting, but on all seriousness, it's a very interesting concept, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. McLean.
Ask Ms. Collins to educate me in particular here about other areas in Canada right now where legal concepts like rights that are human invented, where they might apply elsewhere outside of a human context at this point, and what precedent we're sending and what the limits of this she foresees, or if it is just an expansionary period.
I want to thank Mr. McLean for his question, and I did reference St. Lawrence River and the work of my colleague Alexander Bouleris on this, and many advocates in the St. Lawrence area, and I do hope that we are able to discuss this in more detail in the water study. However, there are a number of places here in Canada, but there's actually internationally, there's been huge movements when it comes to expanding the rights to nature and specific bodies of water in particular. In my home community, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations also have put out calls to action on reconciliation. And one of those calls to action is around recognizing the rights of nature, recognizing nature as living entities, as comes from their kind of worldview and cultural experience. And so this is both in support of those movements, both here in Canada and around the world, but also from nations in my home community as well.
So we'd be talking about movements as opposed to legal concepts at this point.
There's actually, if you look to New Zealand, there's been some successful legal movement around giving bodies of water rights as well. So we can look to international examples.
Did you table that, this committee?
And Bolivia as well. But here in Canada, I think that these movements are pushing for those legal changes similar to our international peers.
It's very complex because you're dealing sometimes with provincial jurisdiction, and I think and you have to operationalize these concepts and then adjudicate them. Anyway, it's going to be a very interesting discussion. Are there any other points on this before we vote? Pardon?
Just a quick point of order, but we skipped over BQ 0.1.
No, we're getting to it right after.
No, after this is BQ1, not BQ.
Before BQ1.
Oh, there is. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not on my agenda. Okay, great. Thank you.
That's why I got a look. There were questions around that. So, shall we go to a vote on NDP 2?
Mr. Duguid.
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield.
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Opposed.
Ms. Thompson.
Opposed.
Mr. Weiler.
Opposed.
Mr. Deltel.
Contre.
Mr. Kirk.
I'm opposed.
Mr. McLean.
Opposed.
Mr. Lake,
Opposed.
Madame Posey,
Contre.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 1R, nays contre 10 this.
So the NDP 2 is defeated, and that brings us to BQ .01.
Alors, écoutez, je ne veux pas argumenter long.
So I don't want to argue too long about this, but when we started studying the bill, I think we spent 20 minutes talking about compliance with the Rio Accord, and this is what my amendment seeks to do. I think everyone will remember the discussion that we had. The issue is strictly relating to the French version, so we want to make sure that we use the right wording compared to what's used in English.
We'll go to a vote. Sorry, did you have your hand?
Just because I'm looking through my email to find the 0.1. I just, if...
Tu l'as reçu à 10h48.
Oh, wait.
C'est surtout enlevé le...
So my concern with the original motion that wasn't tabled was really around the cost-effective language. And I'm seeing here that this is just effective measures, so this seems very supportable. Is that right? Oh, am I on the wrong one? Oh, darn it. Okay. 0.1. And when I look at it, I see one change to precaution, and then I see also highlighted in blue, measure effectif.
What was being proposed for cost effective? Yeah, I've been. Je réfléchis là-dessus depuis que.
I've been thinking about this since you raised it before Christmas. And normally I refer to Ms. Posey about French, but Mr. Deltel, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe we could bring an objective lens to this, a neutral one, and also a legislative lens. Can our experts speak to us about how they see this amendment? So what's the difference between prudence and precaution? Ms. Posey explained her position regarding the text that was proposed earlier, but I'd like to have our experts' opinion on this.
OK. Je dirais que quand...
I would say that when we talked about this situation and this text a few months ago, we insisted on the word prudence because that's what was in the rest of the act. But the committee adopted a definition of the precautionary principle and used the term precautionary principle. So for the English side, in this definition, we used the term cost-effective in English and effective measures in French. So the definition that was adopted includes cost-effective in English and mesure effective in French, precautionary principle in English, and principe de précaution in French. The preamble now uses cost-effective in English and mesure effective in French, precautionary principle in English, and the amendment would change prudence to precaution in French. This will leave two clauses in the Act that use the word prudence instead of precaution, but we can change that later. So I understand from your explanation that it's a matter of coherence and harmonization. The volume is very low. It's hard to hear you. So according to you, it's a matter of coherence with the rest of the act. Yes, indeed. Thank you. We'll take a quick pause. This. In the Déclaration de Rio, we're talking about the precautionary principle in French, and we're talking about mesures effectives in French, and we just want to match that language. Did we adopt that language? No. Okay, so that's what I was confused about. This is the first time we include this wording in the bill. Yes, we're just trying to correct a 20-year-old mistake. Are there any other comments? Ms. Collins.
Just wanted to put on the record again that I am not in favor of the English version of this, that including cost-effective rather than effective, I think is undermining some important principles, but I do support the change that Madame Posey has suggested for the French version, so I will be voting in favor.
Mr. McLean, did you have something? No, eh?
Mr. Duguid.
In favor, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Longfield.
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy. In favor. Ms. Thompson.
In favor.
Mr. Weiler.
En faveur.
Mr. Deltel.
Je suis pour.
Mr. Kirk.
In support.
Mr. McLean.
En faveur.
Mr. Lake.
For.
Madame Posey.
Pour.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 11-11.
Donc, l'amendement est adopté.
So the amendment carries. We're now moving on to BQ1. Yes, so now we're back at Clause 2, replacing at lines 36, page 2. It says at line 36, where it is economically viable. So the interpreter doesn't have the text. So the goal here is to have an act that is tightened. And we're working here towards the health of citizens and the environment. Any other comments? BQ1, any other comments? We're moving to a vote.
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield.
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Opposed?
Ms. Thompson.
Opposed.
Mr. Weiler.
Opposed.
Monsieur Deltel.
Contre.
Mr. Kirk.
I'm opposed.
Mr. McLean.
Opposed.
Mr. Lake.
Opposed.
Madame Posey.
En faveur.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour 2-2, nays contre 9-9.
Okay, so the amendment's defeated, which brings us to NDP 3. Ms. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe because it's such a short amendment, I'll just read it out. Whereas the Government of Canada is committed to openness, transparency, and accountability in respect of the protection of the environment and human health. This is just explicitly stating some core principles that I hope will have unanimous support around the table.
Other interventions? No? Shall we go to a vote?
Mr. Duguid.
In favor, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Longfield,
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
En faveur?
Ms. Thompson,
In favor?
Mr. Weiler,
In favor.
Monsieur Deltel,
Pour.
Mr. Kirk,
Support.
Mr. McLean,
En faveur.
Mr. Lake,
In favor.
Madame Posey,
En faveur.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour, 11, 11.
Okay, so NDP 3 is adopted. We go to CPC 1. Correct?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And in the interest of trying to keep things short, I think that this amendment just ensures that CEPA and the updates to the Act are this amendment ensures that the government stays committed to implementing that risk-based approach to the assessment and management of chemical substances, and I hope that the committee will support this and the clarification that it provides. Thank you.
Shall we go to a vote?
Mr. Dogood,
In support, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Longfield,
Support it.
Support.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
En faveur?
Ms. Thompson,
Support.
Mr. Weiler,
In favor.
Monsieur Deltel,
Pour.
Mr. Kirk,
Support.
Mr. McLean,
In favor.
Mr. Lake,
In favor.
Madame Posey,
En faveur.
Ms. Collins.
In favor.
Yeas pour, 11, 11.
C'est adopté. Est-ce que vous désirez?
It's carried. Shall clause 2 carry as amended? On division?
À l'article 5.
We now move on to clause 5. We have an amendment proposed here, G6. I must note that if G6 carries, amendments PV6, BQ3, NDP10, and CPC2 will not be able to be moved because those 5 amendments change the same line.
All of the clauses that you just said would
Yeah.
be
PV6, BQ3, CPC2. Yeah, those ones, yeah. And we'd wind up with NDP 8. I mean, we'd end up at NDP 8.
And so none of the NDP 8, 9, 10, or 11 are
They're not
impacted by
affected,
this?
according
Thank you so
to
much.
only NDP 10 is affected, sorry. Yeah. Okay, who's, Mr. Weiler, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be moving Amendment G6 here. This amendment makes important changes to the implementation framework of this bill that's under Clause 5.1. This amendment is a fairly long amendment, and it seeks to do a few things with the implementation framework. It ensures how ministers must deal with the right to a healthy environment through the implementation framework. It creates some important reference to air quality within the substance of the right to a healthy environment, and it impacts the time frame of the Act as well. So with S5 already in the preamble, we've recognized that there is a right, that every individual in Canada has a right to a healthy environment as provided under the Act. And we've expanded it in this Act with the definition that a healthy environment is clean, healthy, and sustainable. And in Clause 7 of this bill, we've also affirmed the duty under Section 44 of the bill for ministers to conduct research studies and monitoring activities in support of protecting the right to a healthy environment. And then what this clause that we're dealing with right now, it determines how that's going to be actioned in the bill. And so currently with how the bill is written, it says that ministers shall, within 2 years after the day on which the section comes into force, develop an implementation framework to set out how the right to a healthy environment will be considered in the implementation of this act. What I'm proposing here is that we change this to protect it in the administration of this act. I think this is really important because when we are talking about rights, we want to protect those rights, not simply consider them. And it also will result in consistency through the Act, because when we talk about the right to a healthy environment in other areas, we talk about protecting that right. Furthermore, this through Clause 2.1 makes specific reference to air quality. We know in Canada about 15,000 people die every year simply from poor air quality, which also costs the government and our society billions of dollars in economic losses as well. And lastly, I've proposed to change the time frame in which to develop the implementation framework from 2 years down to 18 months. Subsequent to this amendment being originally put together, we've had testimony in this committee that's made it clear that we actually do need 24 months rather than 18 months in order to effectively consult and develop this implementation framework. So with that, I would encourage if there's any one of my colleagues around the table here that might be interested in proposing a friendly amendment to revert it back to 24 months.
Yes, Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Yes. Would I make a sub-amendment now if I want to revert it back to 24 months?
You can.
Okay, so that's I move that sub-amendment then instead of 18 months, it's 24 months as was originally proposed.
Would anyone like to speak to the sub-amendment? Ms. Collins? No, would you
Sorry,
like...
no. We can vote on the sub-amendment and then.
Okay, let's vote on the sub-amendment. Yes, sorry.
Can I just make something clear? So the sub-amendment essentially encapsulates the original language of CEPA. Is that correct? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, shall we vote on the sub-amendment? 18 months to 20? Okay, Madame Posey?
Ms. Posey, before we move to a vote, I was wondering if our officials could tell us what it will change compared to what S5 was proposing in this clause, because the way this amendment is presented, it's hard to absorb, it's hard to follow. So, like, maybe this is good and another part is not as good, and then, of course, when I go to the second page, when it says in a given geographical area, I'm wondering if the federal government can intervene in any geographic area, or does it have to be done in agreement with the provinces and territories? Are there any other comments? Ms. Collins?
Since we haven't voted on the sub-amendment yet, since it's just the change from 18 months to 24 months, just on that in particular, I am not certain what the best path forward, whether it's 18 months or 24 months, but it seems like if this will garner support from other members in order to pass this, I think what is an important amendment, I'm going to be supporting the sub-amendment.
Okay. Any other questions before we go to a vote? Can we go to a vote on the sub-amendment? On division? Brings us, yeah, on division. That has passed on division. Now we're back to G6 as amended. Yes, Mr. Duguid.
Mr. Chair, if I could again defer to officials, particularly on the thorny issue of jurisdiction and the issue of air quality and how we need to work together with provinces in that particular space. Why that is important, and perhaps just a few reflections on what is going on now in that space.
Yes, so I would say, first, this provision has been written to apply to the entire Act, so singling out air quality or chemicals management. Well, it may be the issues of today, but this Act is meant to last for a long time. And so the idea was that it creates an implementation framework that applies to the entire Act. And on air quality in particular, that is an area of shared jurisdiction. And provinces, territories, and the federal government work collaboratively right now under the air quality management system, which was agreed to in 2012. And whereby jurisdictions agreed on various responsibilities. And so to suggest that the federal minister can fix the problem unilaterally is not appropriate in sort of a collaborative system.
Let's vote.
Ms. Posey. Well, earlier I asked a question and I didn't get any answer about the parts that are affected and how they change S5. I'm not sure if the member wants to explain all of their changes, but I can try and explain it. So there are many changes. We talked about the verb consider to protect. The amendment
instead of elaborate on. Like there are various wording changes. The key changes, though, are to add air quality, and I believe it adds also risk management and risk assessment as specific issues that must be dealt with in the implementation framework, and eliminates the paragraph that talked about reasonable limits with the factors to be considered, which is an important aspect. And then there are a bunch of wording changes from considered to protected, talking about setting out how the act is, the right will be protected instead of elaborating on.
Madame Farquharson.
Ms. Farquharson, what I'm trying to get at is with all of these little bits of amendments, I want to know if this makes S5 stronger at Clause 5. Does it improve it? Because you talked about air quality, and I would almost be tempted to invite people to vote against G6 so that they could vote in favor of BQ3 that can't be proposed if we vote in favor of G6, but BQ3 comes back to the spirit of the bill.
Well, I think you're asking me. Okay, so I think, I mean, I would say I've said that the emphasis on particular aspects of the Act is perhaps not appropriate, and I think the reasonable limits paragraph is an important one, and it would be eliminated.
Okay.
Go to Mr. Weiler, Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to answer Madame Posey's question, the language used in relation to air quality is consistent with the language that Madame Posey has proposed as well. So I just wanted to reference that. And certainly, in my opinion, when we're talking about a right to a healthy environment, the requirement to protect it rather than just consider it would be a much stronger way of articulating that type of an implementation framework. And lastly, on the deletion of reasonable limits, there's nothing preventing the future minister from introducing that within the framework itself. It just removes it as a fundamental requirement to do that.
Ms. Collins.
Thank you. Just a quick question about this jurisdiction piece. In our previous conversations around provincial jurisdiction, my understanding was what you had said was when it came to pollution hotspots that we didn't need to, that like the provincial and territorial jurisdictions are respected in these acts. And so I guess part of me is tempted to suggest to put in the same sub-amendment which before was voted down about respecting provincial and territorial jurisdictions, if that is a concern here for Section 2.1A. And just, kind of a little bit confused about why it would be a concern here and not for pollution hotspots.
I'm not sure here we're talking about, before we were talking about sort of, how can I explain that? I don't think it was a concern before when we were talking about the geographical targeting of the regs. The federal government can act in that area, but I think here we're talking about, I guess it's more the singling out of air quality and chemicals management in particular under the implementation framework, and also the suggestion that you would act alone. Like, for sure, the minister has power to act in the area of air quality and can do targeted regs.
And I don't see a specific reference to the minister acting alone, and just wondering if, like, how, I'm curious how you interpreted that. Why would they not be automatically acting in conjunction with provinces, since that is a requirement when it comes to these issues?
Well, I suppose I read it in the measures that the ministers shall take to protect the right of every individual in Canada to a healthy environment if the ambient air quality goes lower.
And if it said after that, respecting provincial and territorial jurisdictions, would that allay your concerns?
Yeah, I suppose it's not just the legal jurisdiction, it's the process that's been agreed to under the AQMS, under the air quality management system.
And we are acting, like the minister is acting when it comes to the implementation framework, just respecting provincial and territorial jurisdictions. And so perhaps a friendly amendment to include the same language that Madame Posey had sent to the committee, which is just the addition of respecting provincial and territorial jurisdictions in French, dans le respect des compétences des provinces et territoires, et ce, immediately after levels specified. And then maybe, so this is a hopefully friendly amendment, and I guess just to speak to the issue around singling out these, like, as Mr. Weiler pointed out, on average there are 15,000 people who die because of air quality issues in Canada. That is a staggering number. In 2015, a report by the Canadian Association of Physicians for Climate or for the Environment reported 20,000 deaths. And I think it's incredibly important that we single out this issue. CEPA has not been updated for over 20 years. And so it is critical that we single out air quality when it is such an important issue. And I know we're going to have other amendments that cover this, but I implore the committee to take this up in a meaningful way.
So are you proposing a sub-amendment?
Sub-amendment, yes. Same language that Madame Posey
Okay.
had suggested before.
Est-ce que vous comprenez le libellé? Okay. So could you just maybe say where the sub-amendment fits in, just so
For
we're
sure.
aware?
I had suggested it for after the levels specified, in French, le taux fixé.
Okay. Yeah. Can we vote on the sub-amendment? Oui, Madame Posey?
Ms. Posey? Yes, we can vote on the sub-amendment, but between the two, I think I would like us to adjourn. This might be personal, but I think this amendment is important but difficult to fully grasp. But that's why I was asking the question about the impacts it might have. Well, you can move to adjourn. Well, it is 1 o'clock.
Okay, go ahead. Collins?
Just given that it is 1:01 now, we are past our committee time, so we could adjourn and vote on the
Well,
sub-amendment.
I would suggest we just vote on the sub-amendment, and then I think Madame Posey wants to propose a motion to adjourn after we vote on the sub-amendment.
I guess I'm proposing a motion to adjourn now.
Okay, we'll have to vote on that. Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Duguid?
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield?
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy?
In favor.
Ms. Thompson?
No, we're voting on
Opposed.
adjourning.
Mr. Weiler?
Opposed.
Mr. Deltel?
Contre.
Mr. Kirk?
Opposed.
Mr. McLean?
Opposed.
Mr. Lake?
Opposed.
Madame Posey?
Contre.
Ms. Collins?
In favor.
Yeas pool, 2 to...
Okay, so we're not adjourning, but can we vote on the sub-amendment?
Just, I am happy to talk on this amendment for a very long time. I'm happy to vote on the sub-amendment, but I think given Madame Posey's suggestion, we could stay here and chat about this amendment for a very long time, or we could adjourn promptly.
We're going to vote on the sub-amendment, and then I believe Madame Posey might have a motion. Okay, so let's vote on the sub-amendment.
Mr. Duguid?
Opposed.
Mr. Longfield?
Opposed.
Ms. Taylor-Roy?
In favor.
Ms. Thompson?
Opposed.
Mr. Weiler?
It's okay.
In favor.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Deltel?
Contre.
Mr. Kirk?
Opposed.
Mr. McLean?
Contre.
Mr. Lake?
On vote le sous-amendement qui dit dans les compétences de, OK, je suis en faveur. de
Ms.
ce-
Collins?
In favor.
Yeas pool, 4-4, nays contre, 7-7.
So the sub-amendment is defeated. Madame Posey, do you have a motion?
Journement, Monsieur le
Okay,
Président.
I have a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
I don't see any, so congratulations, Madame Posey, your motion passed. Okay, we'll see everybody on Thursday to continue with G6.